draft, which is just minutes away. But first, I wanted to say congratulations again to those Golden State Warriors who are the 2021-2022 NBA champions. Steph Curry's final MVP.
Which is just minutes away.
We just want to give kudos and props to those guys for having a tremendous season and tremendous playoffs and finals. But Chaz, I wanted to begin with you. We went over this and we were discussing like if you had, the chance of rating these players 1 through 5, give us your order and your profile of the top 5 that you believe will be top 5 in this NBA draft. Start with number 5.
Start with 5. Okay, yeah. I mean, as a Pistons fan, there's a couple different ways to look at who we want, with that 5th pick. I feel like the top option has to be Jaden Ivey. If you're a Pistons fan. Now, he's very likely to go, number 4 to Sacramento as well. And, you kind of touched on earlier before we got on about the trades that could happen. The Kings are very involved with that. So I think Ivey is somewhere that could, he's someone that could go 4 or 5. I don't really see him falling beyond that, maybe to 6 at the latest, but I have him as my 4th best prospect. Right behind him, I have Keegan Murray as my 5th best prospect. I think those are probably the 2 guys that go 4 or 5, depending on the order. And then, moving into that top 3, I have razor thin margin between Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren and Paolo Banchero. I feel like all 3 are very worthy number 1 candidates. As I kind of do Jaden Ivey, I think those top 4 are, in a tier of their own. We can talk about some of the flaws that they have. But I'll just start with, Jabari Smith being, arguably the best 3-point shooter in the whole class at 6'10". That's obviously something that's attractive. Chet Holmgren, everything that he can do defensively. And then, he's only scratching the surface offensively. So obviously with the potential with him, and then Paolo Banchero, who's likely to go, 3rd overall to the Rockets. He's probably the most NBA ready prospect of the 3. It seems like he could walk into the NBA tomorrow and probably average, close to 20 points. So, those are my 5, but there's also, guys between 6 and probably 12 that I feel like are just, just on the edge of that. I mentioned Keegan Murray as my 5th guy. I would say that I think I have the other 4 guys kind of in a tier of their own though.
Mm-hmm. Just because I believe, just like you believe, is that top 3 is so close. Rank those top 3 for me. Like if you were the GM of the Orlando Magic, who are you taking with the number 1 pick and why?
That's really tough. I could really see it going any of the 3 options. I think if I'm the Orlando Magic, I'd probably go with Jabari Smith too, because I think it's the safest pick. When you do have the number 1, you really are trying to avoid a bust. And I would say that even though I believe Chet Holmgren is going to be a very good NBA player, he's probably has the most bust potential of the 3. But I don't know. I lean Jabari Smith, but his lack of creativity for others, ability to put the ball on the floor, that's something that Paolo Banchero doesn't struggle with. He can put it on the floor, attack off the dribble. Even though he's not a great passer, I feel like he's better than Jabari is at this stage, as he is a better ball handler. So, all 3 guys, I think they could go in any order, but it's hard because they all have like one glaring flaw that I feel like is kind of hanging them up from being just overall the easy number 1 pick.
You are listening to the Spoken Truth podcast live on YouTube as we get you ready for the 2022 NBA draft. And what we're doing right now is just breaking down and analyzing these top 5 prospects and their ability, with the ability that we think they can reach on the NBA level. So going directly to Chet, what do you think his upside is? Like, who do he compares most to that's in the league right now? We could say or this level of a player.
Yeah, that's tough because, like I said, I don't know if we've ever seen a prospect really like him. I think, maybe the most similar I would say is somebody that was just picked last year in Evan Mobley, someone who's very long. I think Mobley, his body was definitely more NBA ready, when he was coming out, obviously than Chet's is right now. But I just think their defensive versatility, the length, how they can impact the floor, the game on both ends of the floor. They can go inside and outside on offense. They can play, really 1 through 5 is the goal for Chet, to be able to defend. Right now, I think he can probably defend at least 3 positions at an NBA level, and someday it could easily get to 5. So, I think that's the main things with him. His defensive versatility is so, attractive. I think he averaged 3.7 blocks per game, I believe. Impacted probably 2 times more than that. He was so great on the end of that floor. I think Evan Mobley probably is the best comparison, but you could also, I've seen people draw comparisons to Porzingis, Mo Bamba, other guys like that. I don't know. Who do you think he compares to, the easiest?
I kind of agree with the Evan Mobley take that he kind of compares him the most. And the facets of both of the games are kind of similar. I won't go as far as say identical, but the way that I think that he could stretch the floor, but also he has a perimeter shot, which I don't want to say is rare, because we know that a lot of 6 foot, 7 foot individuals, cough Kevin Durant, has the ability to stretch the floor and hit perimeter shots. Now he's not Kevin Durant by all means, but I think his ability to be able to hit those perimeter shots and to have a presence in the paint is going to work well when it comes to ingratiating himself into the NBA and what that entails, because the NBA, whether you want to believe it or not, people say it's gone soft, but there's still a level of physicality that you have to have in this NBA, this league right now. But the thing that I'm not understanding is that throughout the college year that just passed and through the draft lottery, to me, he seemed like he was the consistent number 1 pick. What changed from then to now?
Yeah, you think that was the case going, all the way throughout the end of the regular season too?
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
I think others was gaining traction, but he still was a little bit, Jabari Smith, he was still a head above them, but the others were gaining traction. But up until this point, over the last couple of weeks, it seemed like there's been a shift that I don't think always has been there. Or am I just not reading enough into that?
I think maybe the shift happened a little bit earlier than that. I think coming into the season, you're definitely right that Chet was the number 1 pick. Some people said Paolo was right there as well, but I think those were consensus number 1 and 2. And then I felt like at some point, during the conference season, there was a handful of games right in a row that Jabari Smith was just, obviously the best player on the court. He started to kind of gain traction. I feel like then a lot of people, vaulted him to the number 1 spot, or at least into that conversation with the other 2. And since then, it's kind of been those 3. I don't know though, just a few weeks ago, I was pretty confident that it was going to be Jabari Smith. Now it feels like it could really go any of the 3. I know Paolo Banchero has been gaining a lot of traction, on social media, Vegas odds, what a lot of people are just saying in general. I don't know if that, that might just be smoke and mirrors, and that the Orlando Magic already have their mind made up. I'm not sure. But, I do think that Chet was the consensus number 1 at the beginning of the season. I would say that change probably happened, a few months ago though.
Paolo, speaking of him, Woj just tweeted out not too long ago that he's still in that conversation for that number 1 pick. The Orlando Magic, they're struggling between Paolo and Jabari Smith. But what is his upside? What is Paolo's upside?
Oh man, I feel like it's sky's the limit with him. He's already such a great scorer. A lot of people compare him to, somebody like Carmelo Anthony. I don't know, if he's going to reach that type of career. But you definitely see that potential with the scoring ability already where it is right now at such a young age. And then, he's not a great defender right now. He's not a great passer right now, but I feel like he has the tools. You put him in, a good position around other good players. I feel like he could develop into a pretty special, talent. What are your thoughts on Paolo?
I think for me is I see the potential of a Carmelo, a little less version of a Carmelo Anthony. I don't think he can quite reach that point, that level of a talent. but I do think his upside is one of the best overall in this draft. And he very well could go number one. When I'm thinking about the Orlando Magic and we're thinking about their roster, that the Orlando Magic is a team that we really don't talk about a lot on this show, on this podcast. But stylistically, who fits better with that team out of the three?
I think either one of Jabari Smith or Paolo Banchero would be a better fit. Kind of with the way that they drafted in the past, it seems like Chet Holmgren with Isaac returning from injury. Wendell Carter, who had a very good year last year. Mo Bamba is a free agent. He's probably not going to be back, but they already have a couple of true centers. It seems like they would probably like to get somebody that could play, the 3, 4, and the 5. Somebody like Paolo or Jabari. So like you said, with Woj tweeted out that about Paolo Banchero is very easily still in that conversation, and I think for good reason. You throw him in the mix with Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs, Wendell Carter, Anthony, Ross. It's starting to look like there's a handful plus of Markelle Fultz. They're starting to actually build some talent in Orlando, which I feel like we haven't been able to say in a pretty long time.
Mm-hmm. You are listening to the Spoken Truth podcast as we break down and get you ready for the 2022 NBA draft live on ESPN. You are listening to the Spoken Truth podcast as we get you ready for the NBA draft. Now, I wanted to switch focus a little bit to a lot of rumblings that have been going on in the league the last week involving Kyrie Irving, involving Westbrook, involving all of these potential assets that could be moved in free agency or, the beginning of free agency. What are your initial thoughts on Kyrie possibly leaving Brooklyn? And where is a potential destination you can feasibly see him going to?
I don't know. I think we both saw that list that came out with his preferred destinations. If he ended up leaving the Nets, it's kind of hard to imagine him going to one of those teams like the Lakers or the Clippers, just because they would have to be in a sign and trade. I don't know if the Nets are really in position. I guess they would want to do that if he was going to leave anyways. But it doesn't seem like the front office and Kyrie are really in a place where they're going to be helping each other out, and that's essentially what a sign and trade is. I don't know. It seems like the Nets should want to keep Kyrie just for the sake of also keeping Kevin Durant. If they lose Kyrie, it's very likely that Durant leaves as well at some point in the near future. And there's no way that he, finishes that contract that he just signed in Brooklyn. So, I feel like Brooklyn has to want to bring Kyrie back, but he's obviously not happy right now. And it seems like it's just as likely right now that he wants to leave because from what I can tell, Sean Marks doesn't want to give him a full max contract. He doesn't want to offer him.
Absolutely.
And for good reason, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where a problem lay. That's where the problem lies. That the contract that Kyrie wants, he wants a 4 to 5 year max contract, upwards of $250 million. And Kyrie has not been available enough to demand that type of money at this stage of his career. Based on what we have seen in the last 5 years, he hasn't shown that he can play the amount of games that needs to be played in order for Brooklyn to even compete for a championship. Now, Brooklyn right now is the second odds-on favorite to win the title next year behind Golden State. So bringing Kyrie back is essential to them actually living up to that bill. And you don't do that if you don't have Kyrie, and you definitely don't do that if you don't have Kevin Durant. That's the domino to fall. If Kyrie leaves, you said it earlier, I don't know how much longer Kevin Durant stays with just him and Ben Simmons. That's not a championship level team. So it's going to be very interesting to see if the Lakers team get involved. Now, the Lakers can only offer him the $6 million exception. Now, why would you take that versus taking the amount of money that Brooklyn is going to give you just because they don't want to offer you a long-term deal? And if I'm Sean Marks, why would I want to offer you a long-term deal when you have shown in the last 3 to 4 years that you cannot be reliable to show up to work? So for me, the whole situation is very tricky. It's very dicey because on one end, you want to please Kevin Durant. He is the face of your organization. He is the star. You want to give him exactly what he wants. But at some point in time, you cannot continue to not be able to depend on your secondary star. And Brooklyn cannot depend on Kyrie Irving. And a part-time Kyrie Irving, it's not a championship. He can say, you know what, I just want to take a week off or a month off or 2 months off for no reason. And if I'm Brooklyn, at the end of the day, I'm trying to run an organization. And if this is the star level that I'm getting, I don't want that in my organization. So if I'm Brooklyn, I say I would do 1-1. You know what? We'll give you a 2-year deal. We'll give you an opt-out after the first year. And then if you decide you want to go, you want to go. But I am not giving you a 5-year max contract worth $250 million. When you have shown the last 3 years your inability to show up when your team really needs you the most.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would probably, offer him a 2-3 year if he wanted that, but it sounds like he doesn't have any interest in doing that. If he does leave, like I said, I feel like it has to be a sign and trade. I mean, there's no way that he signs a mid-level exception, like you said, with the Lakers. There's no way he signs elsewhere where somebody actually has cap space, like the Pistons or like the Spurs. I don't think there's any chance of him going somewhere like that, who would actually have the cap space to just sign him outright. So I feel like maybe a trade is coming. I thought it was kind of weird that, on that list, it included the 76ers, which is, obviously where James Harden was dealt, and Kyrie seemed upset when that initially happened. So that would be kind of weird for him to actually.
And the one and now go to the 76ers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I there was a couple other teams that were just kind of head scratching. So, I never know where all this information is coming from, and it could just be a smokescreen for Kyrie's camp to try and get, Brooklyn to actually offer 4 or 5 years. I think they'll probably just stand pat and offer him, 2 years, like you said, maybe something around that. But I don't know. It seems just as likely right now that he gets traded, which, I mean, that would just be crazy from how he left. Boston and KD left Golden State, and then for this, for it to end this way would be pretty catastrophic.
Yeah, just looking at the beginning of the season, when you had Harden, when you had Kyrie, you had Durant, and you said, well, this team should definitely win a title. And for it to end the way that it did is pretty remarkable. It's crazy to me how it ended. But we're a couple of minutes away from the draft. I wanted to touch on another team real quickly, your Detroit Pistons, and the trade that they made with the Portland Trail Blazers. How do you feel about that going into this draft? What does that do for the Pistons' sake, and how can that team get better in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like it was definitely a trade that was coming for a long time. I think when we signed Jeremy Grant a couple of years ago, people kind of expected it to be that he wasn't going to play out the full contract, and that another team would come along at some point and try and add him. That's exactly what happened. I thought it could be last year. It ended up happening during the summer. I feel like Portland picked up a pretty good player, but I'm not exactly sure where the Trailblazers are going. I mean, it kind of seems like they want to get younger in one sense, but then they're also
a lot of moving parts of that organization right now.
Yeah, I get trying to, get a lot of different type of players that can do different things and all that, but it seems like they don't really have a direction. So I'm interested to see who they draft tonight, and then maybe that, direction will become clearer. But back to the Pistons side of it, I think they kind of got done what they wanted to get done for a long time, but I don't know that they got, back enough that they really should have made that pick. They did not get, a top 10 pick this season, which, I don't think Jeremy Grant is worth that, but it was probably the goal for the Pistons, if they were going to make that trade to try and get that. They don't even get a first round pick at all. And then they swap picks, in the second round tonight. So that doesn't really move the needle, I feel like, much. You kind of just unloaded, I feel like, your second best player, and you didn't really get much back. We'll see where that 2025 pick ends up. I mean, Portland could be pretty bad in a couple of years, and maybe that pick will mean something, but right now it doesn't mean a lot. So if the Pistons are
Portland's bad now.
Yeah, that's true. So I feel like, it's a pretty good chance that they'll be even worse in 2025, but I don't know. You don't get anything back for right now, which is tough. So I feel like the Pistons, made a good move to get him off the books. It opened up cap space. So now they have over $40 million in cap space now. So you can offer DeAndre Ayton and another player if you want to, like Jalen Brunson or Anthony Simons, somebody who's on Portland. So they have the money to do that. But for you said that how can they get better tonight? I feel like the main thing is to hit, on that fifth pick. If they get somebody who can come in right away, be a starter, then you really kind of speed this up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. As we are minutes away from the first pick of the NBA draft, we will bring you that pick live on the Spoken Truth podcast on YouTube. I wanted to stay with Detroit for a little minute. I know, right? We're talking about Detroit a lot.
Love
we
it.
don't we don't do that much on this show. DeAndre Ayton, that to me that is an interesting piece to add to that team. To pair with Kay Cunningham. What do you think the possibility of that duo? Like, I know that's not a championship duo. I know maybe that's a play-in duo. What do you think those two guys are young? What do you think those two guys can benefit from each other? And what is the upside from that duo if that were to happen?
Yeah, we could be talking about, a point guard center duo that could be, together and be pretty good, for the next 5 to 10 years. If that was the case, there's no inkling that DeAndre Ayton is actually going to sign with the Pistons, but it does sound like there is interest, potentially on both sides of that. So it's something that I feel like Ayton is going to heavily consider. So if they find a way to bring him in, you pair him with Cade Cunningham, who I think is going to be a perennial all-star, probably within the next couple of years. And then you have guys like Saddiq Bey, Marvin Bagley, who, I haven't given up on yet. He showed some flashes last season at the end of the year after getting traded to the Pistons. I believe he's a free agent, so we'll see if Detroit even brings him back. But, they actually have some pretty good players. Isaiah Stewart is another guy off the bench that, they're not close to contending. But like you said, I feel like they're close to getting into the play-in, which – I feel like next year that's probably the goal. If you hit on a pick tonight and then you add at least one major free agent, then I feel like maybe that is a realistic expectation.
Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I love hosting this podcast and this show is that people just, a lot of other shows just like to touch on the top level teams and like the Lakers and, the Clippers, the Golden State Warriors. We actually talk about these lower tier teams and heavily discussions. Now, obviously, we don't really mention the Pistons that often, but I wanted to touch on the Spurs. Now, there's been a lot of rumblings in that Spurs organization about the potential moves that they can make in the offseason. Now, these are just speculations, but what do you think the upside of them bringing in some of these key players to either pair with Murray or Murray being an exit? Because there's been a lot of discussion on him potentially leaving for Zach LaVine or going somewhere or being paired with Zach LaVine. What do you think is the best case scenario for the San Antonio Spurs during free agency?
Yeah, to me, it would be to keep DeJounte Murray. After a season like that, I wouldn't.
At the expense of Zach LaVine?
I think they have enough cap space to at least throw it at Zach LaVine. I don't think he's going to end up there. He probably has 3 or 4 choices that would come before San Antonio. Mm-hmm. But I do believe they have the money to at least have it be in the mix. But I don't know. It sounds like they're interested in unloading DeJounte Murray, which we'll see if that's what happens. But I'm not sure. I wouldn't do that. I think bringing in somebody to pair with him, if it is, Zach LaVine, which is kind of a pipe dream, or somebody more realistic like DeAndre Ayton or Anthony Simons, somebody probably on that next tier below than Zach LaVine. At least you would start to build it in the right direction. I feel like they took a step forward last season. Unless you get back a big return for DeJounte Murray, then I feel like it would be a step back to trade him.
I think his upside, especially when we're looking at 10, 15 years down the line, I do think he could be a person that goes to multiple All-Star games and could be a winning player on a championship level team. Now, I'm not saying he could be the best player on a championship level team. You know how I feel about, those type of players. Yeah. I don't think he's one of them at this stage in his career. Maybe he could develop and mature into that, but right now he's not that. But I would keep him solely because his upside is tremendous. And I've seen the best of Zach LaVine. Like, I think to this point, we have seen the best of Zach LaVine. Last year, the year before, I think we've seen the best. I don't think he can improve any more than what he has already done. I think Murray has he has another leap in him. We've seen him make an all-star game. He has another leap in him to me that I would not put that. I know they're both young still, but I will not trade Murray for LaVine. I will stick with my horses. Now, if I could get LaVine as well on the team, then we may be talking about a duo that I can see competing for a play-in, maybe winning one round of a play-in in the playoffs. But I will not get rid of my young assets to pair with someone that I've already seen the best upside of. And that upside is not really an MVP caliber player.
Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, if they do add Zach LaVine at the expense of DeJounte Murray, are they any better than they were last season?
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think maybe a little.
I don't think. I mean, maybe a couple games better here and there.
It doesn't really move the needle. I mean, if you can find a way to pair the guys, that's a pretty good backcourt, and you can start to maybe build around that. So I feel like the move has to be to keep Murray. Their flow now ideals maybe to try and move up in the draft tonight and replace Murray. I'm not sure what they're thinking in the Spurs front office, but I feel like it would be the best option to hang on to Murray and then just try and add with the 9th pick tonight.
Absolutely. You are listening to the Spoken Truth podcast live on YouTube as we are literally minutes away from the first pick of the NBA 2022 NBA draft. Don't start it yet. No.
You want me to stop it?
Yeah, stop it for me. I wanted to text Tunde real quick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Woj just tweeted too. It sounds like Paolo is now looming as front runner, be number 1 overall pick.
Yep, that's the one I was reading earlier.
Yeah, it sounds like
when we get back, we're going to go directly to back to the NBA draft talk.
Okay.
And by the time we get back, basically we could talk about the number 1 pick and who it will be after that. But I want to start at maybe at the 2-minute mark to lead into that pick.
Okay.
I just want to text her today.
Yeah, Woj just said now too. Orlando is expected to take Paolo. So.
Really?
Yeah, he just said that on the ESPN coverage. So sounds like it's probably a done deal now. That kind of sends obviously shockwaves down. Does Jabari fall to 3 or does OKC take him instead of Chet?
I have no idea, but let's go back and let's break that in. I'ma just say live coverage. Then you could go with that breaking news there. That's what we are expecting to happen.
Yeah.
So whenever you want to start it.
Go ahead.
You guys are tuning in to the coverage of the 2022 NBA Draft Spoken Truth Edition live on YouTube. Now, we have some breaking news right now that we just received. Now, this is from Adrian Wojnarowski, so he is a credible source for ESPN. Chaz, what is that breaking news?
Yeah, Woj just came on ESPN a few minutes ago. He's been tweeting kind of looming to that, on and off for the past hour, like you mentioned. He just came on now and pretty much made it official that the Magic are expected to take Paolo Banchero now. It's been kind of assumed for the last few weeks that it would be Jabari Smith, maybe Chet Holmgren still in that conversation. We knew Paolo was in the mix, but now it sounds like he is actually going to move up. Where a lot of people had him at 3, he's actually going to be taken first overall by the Magic. What's your first reaction to hearing that?
Wow. I mean, I thought Jabari Smith was I don't want to say a lock to get that number one, but I thought for sure that he was going to be the guy for the Orlando Magic. And this sends shockwaves for the remaining top 5, top 10, because you don't know. We expect that we know the order of the next two, but at this particular time, who knows? And, the last couple of hours, we have been getting those signals that maybe they consider taking him instead of Jabari Smith. Chet, was a long distant third option. But now that, Woj has confirmed that that is potentially the case, this just sends shockwaves into the NBA. And we're going to get that verbiage and that confirmation right now with the number one pick as we stand by.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense too. Like I said, I mean, they were all kind of on that same level, but Paolo is probably the most NBA ready right now.
Mm-hmm. And he is selected with the number one overall pick in the 2022 NBA draft. Your initial thoughts on him being selected number one? What's the reason behind this?
Well, I mean, I feel like they believe that he's going to be able to step in day one and be arguably their best player. I mean, coming off a season where he averaged close to 20 at Duke against high-level competition, he was arguably the best player in the country. And then he gets taken first overall. He's going to come in, next to guys like we mentioned earlier, Franz Wagner, Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Wendell Carter. That's starting to look like, a pretty formidable roster if you can keep, building around the edges, which obviously they're going to continue to try and do tonight. I don't know. It seemed like a lot of people thought he was going to go, third to the Rockets. Instead, the Magic move up. We'll see how that affects Chet Holmgren and Jabari Smith. I would assume that OKC sticks with Chet Holmgren and Jabari instead falls to 3. But I could be completely off with that. Sam Presti and the Thunder might prefer Jabari Smith, and they might be, excited that Orlando took Paolo instead.
Now you are thinking that Chet moves into the second slot right now?
I had Chet going to OKC no matter what. Yeah, I have him third on my big board, but I thought OKC was going to take him second overall no matter what.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think Jabari probably falls from 1 to 3 instead. We'll see if OKC.
That's a huge swing.
Yeah,
from 1 to 3, that is a huge swing. I just find it fascinating that the momentum seemed over the last couple of hours. It kind of shifted, and we've been hearing Jabari Smith for like the last day. Although it was a close 1-2 race, we've been hearing that he's going to go number one. Now, just the wee hours into this draft, literally just the last couple of minutes here, Orlando Magic has made that decision that they're just going to go with their instinct and their gut and take him number one. I can't say that I'm not shocked because I thought Jabari was going to go number one. But what's the ceiling for Paolo? What's the ceiling for him? Can he be an all-star? Can he be a rotation player? Can he be an all-NBA player? Can he be the best player on a championship team? What is the ceiling for this young man?
I think there's no question that an all-star is in his future. He's a guy that's going to be able to score right away. I don't know, if he's going to be the number one option on a championship level team, because to become that, you need the leadership, you need the all-around game, you need the defense, you need the consistent effort. All that stuff is something that Paolo does struggle with at times right now, which, is, that's normal for anybody his age. Coming in at 19 years old, I feel like we expect that probably with all three of these guys, that it's going to take some time. But I think down the road, Paolo could be an all NBA type of player. It wouldn't surprise me if he's one of the best forwards in the league at one point. I got a chance to see him play a few months ago in November, I think it was, and I was blown away with his pull-up game, with his physicality. I mean, when he drives, he goes straight into contact. Jabari Smith is somebody that really needs to improve his handle. Chet Holmgren is somebody that gets bumped off his spot because of his lack of strength. Paolo is somebody that doesn't struggle with either one of those. So it totally makes sense that Orlando took him. Like you said, I thought Jabari Smith was going to be the pick. But we both know, I think, how good Paolo could potentially be. So it doesn't surprise me that Orlando did take a chance on him instead.
Absolutely. And you are listening to the Spoken Truth podcast as we previewed the 2022 NBA draft. There's a lot of excitement in the league. What we're going to do for you guys in the coming minutes and maybe in a couple, 30 minutes or so, is that we're going to be recapping this entire, 1 through 5, maybe 1 through 10 picks. What our third co-host, who will be joining us very soon. But for now, thank you guys for joining us on this special live edition of the Spoken Truth podcast. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing to our podcast on Spotify and YouTube. All you gotta do is type in the Spoken Truth